Ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls, welcome to the Reaction Time podcast, live on this wonderful Wednesday evening. We skipped a week because I had and have the Rona, which is unfortunate, and you can probably tell in my voice, but doesn't matter. Still okay. Still talking about League of Legends, and we didn't actually miss that much from last week to this week, so it's K. I am joined, as usual, by Steven and Eric. Gentlemen, how are you now?
Oh, I'm killing the game. We made it.
Having a blast experimenting with troll items.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, Eric and I just got out of a normal game of League of Legends that was very unpleasant for most of us involved because there was a Hecarim that had 30 kills in the game, and that wasn't good, and because it wasn't on our team.
That's big yucky. Don't allow that in the future.
Yep.
I'll try.
We made an attempt. We won one team fight, thanks to the power of 200 years. But
Cool beans. What are we talking about? What's the plan, boys?
we should talk about the World's Finals since we never actually did that. So we're gonna start there. So, what would it be? About 10 days ago now was the World's Final in Shanghai between Damwon Gaming and Suning Gaming, which did in fact finish 3-1 to Damwon. Gonna pat myself on the back because I said from the very start of this podcast that Damwon were gonna win the tournament, and I was right. So
Yeah.
everybody else can suck it. Because I definitely didn't pick a favorite going in or anything like that. No, I would never. But the games themselves were closer than the end of the series may appear. It was a very interesting series and very good to watch. Eric, I'm going to start with you. What was your biggest takeaway from the series as a whole?
The biggest one is that when spice works, it's great. When spice doesn't work, it leaves a really bad aftertaste in your mouth, and then you need to cleanse the palate very strongly and not let them play Omnistone jungle Nidalee.
Eric and I sat and watched this series together after it was live because I wasn't awake for it when it was live. Steven, please explain to me what Omnistone Nidalee jungle is supposed to do for you. Please, you're the big brain jungler.
I'm the big brain jungler.
Tell me what the point of this build is.
It should have been like a utility scrimmage kind of build, I guess, where you're going in there and but that didn't happen. And isn't that another one of them where they got none of the dragons with Nidalee as your jungler? Was the big.
I don't remember if it was none, but they got completely dicked on Mac pressure for the entire time.
Oh no, they got one because they got the Elder.
Yeah. I think in every single
they did not get any of the first four.
Right. I think in all of their losses, they got no elemental drakes, and then
won a fight on Elder.
Right. But imagine the game. Because you look at it and it's they're okay, they're not doing great. But if they had any of the dragons and someone didn't have soul, it's an entirely different game. So they just surrendered off of that, in my opinion.
Yeah. And Steven is correct. Total elemental drakes in the entire series was 13-4 to Damwon, and Suning's 4 were all in the one game that they won.
It's important, and you're picking junglers that are supposed to be aggressive and keeping control of that jungle, because it was Nidalee and a Graves.
Well, game one was
right?
Shen, so game one they played River Shen.
Right. So that's fine.
Then it was Nidalee. Then there was the Rengar game.
The Rengar game was the one they won.
Right.
And then I forget what he played in game 4. Game 4 was a disappointment all around, so I didn't.
Game 4 was Graves.
Yeah.
Oh, okay.
So yeah. So in we'll give the River Shen a pass just on it. Like it serves a different purpose. But in the games where you're picking the jungler, that is supposed to power farm and or fight and or get resources in the Drakes, and you don't do it, and you lose all of it. It's not even like, hey, they lost like 1 or 2 dragons early, but they got the later ones, or they got the early ones and didn't get the later ones. They got none of them.
Well, and that's like it's the entire thing with why I wanted to ask about the Omnistone build itself, because like if you look at the definitions of most of the keystones that you can roll off of Omnistone, most of them require an enemy champion to do anything.
Right, so you
Which
have
means,
to be up
like,
them
by
guts.
nature, you need to be ganking, you need to be involved in the games. So if you're doing that, why are you picking Nidalee in a power farming meta into a Graves that just wants to power farm? So if you're ganking, you're just going to lose half your jungle. The theory of it in the meta that it's in doesn't make sense.
And it didn't work, but
trying
to rationalize it, I'm assuming that SOFM wanted to be inside of the Graves, like, because Nidalee could possibly, if he pathed correctly, if Nidalee shuts down that Graves in an early fight in a 1v1, maybe at the crab or whatever, she can keep doing that for the whole game. And I don't recall if SOFM even went for that like contest on the first crab and lost.
There was a lot of things that went wrong in that game fairly early on.
Yeah.
And that like led to that kind of getting out of control, even outside of that lane. He also low rolled really hard on the Omnistone procs that he did get. He got stuck on Glacial Augment a lot.
Ugh.
And like even if you do show up and find the Graves, like Glacial Augment is not actually the combat sum you want to roll in that scenario. Like getting the one auto attack with the slow is nice and all, but it's not that good. It might have also like really skewed his build path, because then he felt like compelled to buy the GLP just to try and get the Super Soaker procs. Yeah. And like that also like put him in a really bad build in general. And like that plus the fact that like there, like we can talk more about like the broader sense macro things that are happening in this series, which are largely that they never figured out how to deal with Beryl getting to roam top lane and bail out Nuggery in the 1v1.
Beryl Pantheon. Pantheon. So good.
The Pantheon, but then even when he's on Leona or these other picks, like they would get this like high shove in bot lane where Ghost and Beryl would force Huanfeng and Sword Art under turret. Beryl would back. Beryl would roam top, get a gank for Nuggery in top lane, and then the entire time Ghost is still pushed in bot lane and is left unpunished because Huanfeng has to last hit under turret. So like it almost felt to me like Suning needed a more hard commit on Ghost when he was all alone, as opposed to trying for these 3v3 fights, because we also saw Damwon beat them in the 3v3, which is very bad.
And it's not like Ghost was playing Ezreal 4 games this series, right? He's on picks that, in theory, if you hard commit onto an Ashe or a Jhin or a Caitlyn, you can kill them.
Right.
But didn't happen.
Yeah. So like it goes to also show that just like lane priority is really important with how this meta shaped up, where like having the push advantage in the lane is more important than having a safe matchup in the lane, where like the Ezreal actually ended up losing up at the highest level of competition on the map to these prio lanes who can just power shove and force that duo under turret.
But Steven's point about the Pantheon, I do think, is astute. Two of Damwon's 3 wins, game 1 and game 4, were both Beryl on the signature pick on the Pantheon, doing what he does. And the game 3 on the Braum, like, lower impact, obviously, but it still, he was able to play his role to a good degree. And I do, like, I want to go back to Omnistone one more time, just for a little bit, because what was fun about Game 3, I thought, was that we saw the way Omnistone could work. Because you've got Omnistone Jax as the top lane in that, and that was actually really good in the lane in Decathlon. They showed off a lot of the things you can get when you get, like, a Hail of Blades proc or a Fleet Footwork proc, and can get in and get out and get the trades you want to do. And it was just so interesting that, like, yeah, it's that you have these two kind of out of left field uses of the thing. One of them showing the high end of the potential of the thing, and one of them showing the low end of the potential.
Yeah.
But one of them being radically different in jungle and a lane. Like,
yeah,
to me, like, on, like, anytime that you look at Omnistone as a jungle opportunity, like maybe Olaf or somebody that's like really going to go in for an exchange and where they can constantly be using that product. But something in the top lane where like you just change how you're going to trade or when you're going to trade just because you're constantly getting that opportunity to use the Omnistone makes more sense every time. Even if it's mid lane, bot lane, it just is infinitely better in a lane than jungle. From
Eric, I know you want to talk about good SOFM one time, so let's talk about the SOFM moment in this series, the Rengar plays in Game 2. What, like, how did that work? What did you see? What, like, is there anything more SOFM than that being his highlight play of the series?
I can't think of what it would be. The big brain plays even from draft of the Rengar into the Evelyn, with a max cooldown reduction like immediately. It's basically the same thing he does on Shen and Lee Sin, right? Where he rushes getting max CDR by getting the 20% item, then getting a Kindle gem, then getting the boots, and then he hits the 40% CDR, and then proceeds to have basically infinite ultimate cooldown reduction on either Shen or Rengar, which is hilarious. And so then you saw that really kick in, where in the mid game he just presses his alt button. He shows where Canyon is on the map. Canyon is very sad, and then they proceed to have these weird numbers advantages. He also had some sick micro in these games, which like really showed off like what top tier play on this champion that no one sees played anymore looks like. Where he, the big one that got called out by the casting desk is when he auto attacks the Gromp to get the extra proc so that his Bola Tossed has the empowered, so that when he throws it over the wall, Ghost has to flash away in order to not die. Things like that you know, as a silver gold player, I'm not going to think about that. I'm just going to try and flash over the wall and be a dipshit. So like it was really cool to see like these like really smart plays in that sense. Also to see that really the sheer amount of healing that's available from these like utility tank items like the Knight's Vow. The big highlight play in that win was the 2v3 on the dragon that won them the soul, the only soul they got in the series, and where he repeatedly they continue to all in to try and kill SOFM instead of turning for Juanfan because they think they can get the kill, and he just doesn't die because he pops the W for this massive amount of health back, and then he hides in the bush, and then he jumps out of the bush, and then he hides in the bush again, and it's like, come on, stop teasing us. And so that was really great to see. That moment was also great to me because it was the one moment in the series where it really felt like they let Juanfan actually participate in the game before 35 minutes. Every other game in that series, he was completely forced out until those Elder Dragon fights. Or if he was involved in the fight, he was like way behind, and they had a great time focusing him out. So like the fact that like that was a game where he was on Jhin and was actually
it was the only game where he was on Jhin.
Yeah, and was actually let to participate was really huge. So that was really, you know, that was the good side of getting to see this team play.
Juanfeng in the 3 losses on Ezreal, Aphelios is into things that
Big
have
sad.
more lane priority.
like
than
Jim.
those other things do. Eric, just in the game we played before this, was like, "Oh look, I'm laning with Aphelios, the worst level 1 champion in the game."
Yeah.
And it's you just lose the priority, particularly like game 4 into Caitlyn. Just couldn't do anything in that lane, and he couldn't play the game until they lost.
Especially when you're looking at Beryl on the other side, who's not going to be in lane, as Eric mentioned earlier. Like, if he gets opportunity to roam, and they just spoon-fed the opportunity to roam, and then they stayed in that position, not transitioning into lane swap or into later game like grouping. They didn't push that, and so they stayed in laning phase longer. They let Beryl and Ghost just bully the crap out of them, and they lost 3 games.
It was also really disappointing because Damwon didn't have to change their game style or their template at all after the 4th game. And like it would have been nice to have seen them forced onto other strategies, because their loss was one of these games where they did pick a comp that wasn't their style, and then it showed. So like if Suning could have figured out how to stop, okay, at this point in the game, Beryl's going to back. He's going to roam top lane. He's going to show up and bail out Nuguri, who's losing this lane matchup or is even. And then in the meantime, Canyon is power farming, not ganking. Like if they could have found a way to have contested these axes of power that they set up, either by letting Sword Art match the gank top side somehow, or getting the jump on the bot lane who got left there, even punishing Canyon when this is happening, if you know where he is on the map. But they couldn't figure out how to do it, and it really felt like they just got outclassed on this like macro templating, and the game plan didn't change.
Well, and it's also the thing that kind of sucks about game 3 going the way that it did, because Dom1's team comp in game 3 also wasn't like the cookie cutter thing. They obviously know how to play with Kennen, and Nuguri has defaulted to playing with that. But when the rest of the series, he's playing Ornn every game, and you have Canyon on the Graves on a power farming pick, but you have that one change in the top lane from what the comp is, and have a chance to find some way to play around that as Suning, and just can't get anything done, whether it's because of your picks, whether it's because of your builds, what have you. There were a lot of things that were weird and not great in game 3. It felt like that was their opportunity, because game 1, game 4, Dom1 plays a team fight comp with Ornn and a power farming jungler and just wins and takes every dragon. And the fact that the series started and ended in the same place means that I don't know how far we really got for Dom1 actually being pushed, which is kind of sad if we take it in that angle.
Right. On the flip side, we did see weaknesses in Damwon that hopefully teams can watch footage of and then figure out how to solve for next split, or at least have some ideas about how they play the game in LCK, which is that their decision making, if the game didn't end as soon as they got Dragon Soul, was actually terrible. And they lost multiple fights on Baron or Elder contests, which like went very poorly. And a lot of that was due to the fact that Suning was willing to take bin these like super scaling champions in top lane that could hard win team fights. And then so we'd see like the Jax jump in, or him show up at these fights and do serious amounts of work. It was pretty impressive. And like their late game fighting did seem lackluster when it was the actual 5v5. And as well as like their setup for those contests, like they didn't have the right map pressure going into these scenarios to actually get numbers advantage, or to like force Suning to sacrifice for the Elder contest or the Baron contest that would make them really worthwhile.
Steven, you look like you're about out of thoughts.
Yeah, I mean, you didn't get the souls in the whole theme of the year. We made these fancy dragons. You get a lot of like value out of controlling them, like, and you got 0. And Elder that's just a deny. That's not even really a benefit for you at that point.
The fact that they got 0 elemental drakes in games they lost,
yep,
is just a ridiculous stat. That like, we can talk around about everything else, but the fact that there were systemic problems enough that in the 3 games they lost, they did not get a single dragon before 30 minutes in the game. Not one. That's you're not going to win the series ever. Sorry.
Yeah, and funnily, it changes every later outcome. Like even if you got like the first dragon, like that's enough of a difference that might change a trade, that might change like someone being caught out and actually getting killed, or an expenditure of summoner spells, and you get something out of it because you got that little bump of whatever it may be. It could be more damage, it could be damage to towers, whatever. Like you start stacking dragons into the 3 and 4 mark, like that, you've completely changed how you can play the game.
Yeah, but Dom won, I think, pretty easy to say, well-deserved champions. They were the best team at the tournament pretty much the entire way through. They beat everybody that came up against them, and sure, we could have wanted to see Dom one top in the final, but I think Suning proved that they were the team that was right to be there. So I don't think it's any question. Congrats to Dom one, the best team in the world, period, hands down.
Yep.
Eric, what were your thoughts on the opening ceremony?
Well, it was interesting that they like went for this theme where they were trying to like really represent a lot of the other opening ceremonies that they've done over 10 years, where like, you know, they have the cosplay Zed sword fight on stage, which has been at other like Worlds events and is actually really popular in like these China Live events. And so like there was that. They had some other like montage moments from other opening ceremonies. Galio is a bit of a disappointment as your drop-in guest instead of Elder Dragon. Like, come on. Elder Dragon's much cooler than Giant Galio.
But it being an allusion to the Warriors video was an important part of this year specifically, so I understood why that was the choice.
Yeah. I did really like the freaking light show from the cup, you know, where they blast the light into the sky. That was sweet. Also, like lighting up the different buildings in Shanghai. Although I don't know, you know, what that AR experience would have been like aside from just watching it on stream, but that was really cool. Those were my big takeaway moments. I didn't enjoy the KDA concert this year as much, or like more of like the live audio experience as much this year as previous
Steven,
years.
you look like you have some thoughts you want to
Yeah,
share.
I have lots.
You
So,
made a face.
Someone make some like timeouts if I'm going too ham. Like I don't want to like hurt anyone's feelings.
No,
or
get out
anything. But
your moment.
it wasn't good. It was not. When you've showcased that you can do it and then you just don't do it or you fall short, it's extra bad. I think if it's come out, I would love to know. I think there was rendering issues. Like literally there was passes that they've done in the past, like on the first KDA experience, not even the true damage experience. They would have reflections on the stage, so that would place them and anchor them on the ground. They would so that was not there at all. So none of the characters looked like they were in the space, which is the point of AR. Like you have to do that pass. It looked like the lighting pass was dropped.
Or that they were like twice as tall as the normal people who are behind them on stage.
That was kind of okay for the fact that I think in the first KDA they were taller too, but they're supposed to be like these ethereal champion beings, and I think they are modeled to be slightly taller, like by like a foot or so. But that was there was something wrong with how they were anchoring them and tracking them to their marks on the stage. There's something. I wish they would just come out and say something went wrong, because it just looked like it. And has there been any statement made on why they used fundamentally different models from every other KDA deliverable that they had? The models didn't look the same from the short, from the videos, from the promotional art. Like, did they try to make them look more like the stand-in artists? I don't know. It didn't look like it. It just looked like a bad render pass. I've seen like PlayStation 2 era model used as a meme, and that is factual.
It's pretty like there were the moments on stream where they zoomed in at all on the faces were just like
Bad.
they were actively bad, and that's not something I have expected from Riot. The
No.
the thing I will say, so my thoughts on this were the visuals were below par, but I understand that. I, as a musician, which is my primary background, I'm here for Riot's music editing and all the things they put into their all the things they put into these shows on that side of things. And I thought that was really well done overall. The ways they combined their world's anthem history and interwove them through the background of everything they did, I thought was really well done and really tastefully done. It did feel like in that aspect a real culmination of the last 10 years and how moments were tied together musically. That like really impressed with how that was. Beyond that, I am excited for next year when hopefully there isn't a pandemic to impact production time and live audience values and all of the things that just were an impossibility this year to prepare for, because I imagine that their staff on the ground was smaller and different than it would have been in any other year. Obviously, the fact that they had a live audience at all was a minor miracle given the state of the world and the state of this country. It wouldn't have happened in the United States, period. And I know that Shanghai getting another chance at this next year, it's not. They're going to do everything they can to step up their game, and that makes me as excited as anything. So it wasn't as good as it could have been. I think we all understand that, and to a degree, we all understand why. So they'll get it better next year.
I personally don't give the pandemic an excuse on this one because the AR was so good everywhere else. In that other facility where they had like the ground disappearing and stuff like that, that was absolute nails. And there was your showcase that you could do the AR stuff, and the only reason they did the KDA is the cash grab. If you couldn't do it right, you couldn't even do it close to what you've done just the previous year and the year before that, just don't do it. You had plenty of time. You knew what you were walking into. And if I really want to hope that some high-end money person was like, no, you're going to put the AR stuff in there. We go and sell this stuff. It has to be there. And the team was like, we don't want to do it. And they're like, no, you're going to do it. And they're like, okay, we'll do it, but it's not going to be good. I hope that conversation happened. And I hope someone looks really fucking stupid because it was not good. There's other ways around it. The choreo, like all the costuming, the choreography for the actual performers, everything was nails. It was really good. That was a good experience. That was horribly marred by the fact that this was the AR stuff was shoehorned in poorly. And you could have done just like the cutscenes, like the Akali coming in on the bike from there. Just do that cutscene and then drop in the voice talent and the dance talent in the Akali costume. Don't do the AR stuff. Just drop it. If you couldn't do it, don't do it. And
okay, my last thought, because the thing I remembered, the team's entrance to the stage was sick. That was nasty. That was so cool.
Yeah. That's why I don't give a pass on the KDA AR stuff, because just
that's fair.
Like if you go back and watch the prep that they did for True Damage and that ceremony and that team, which I'm assuming they're using a lot of the same people, they treat it like an art form, and they should be respected for it. And so they would have never allowed that to be on live feed if they had known that it was going to look like that.
Eric, any final thoughts?
Obviously the other reason I'm looking forward to next year is because with the 10-year anniversary, at the 5-year, they had a representative from all of the 4 previous winners like go up and kind of do a handoff of the trophy at the beginning of the ceremony, where FNKY and Toys and Faker and I think Mata like all showed up and like put the trophy there or placed it, and that was really cool. And I'd love for them to have done something like that this year, where there aren't as many well, first off, in the final, there were no prior winners. But then also in like even earlier rounds, there were no other winners that you could have like had contest this. And it would have been very cool to have had like, this, Faker show up. Like have Faker at this event, please. And especially with all of like the comments Showmaker made going into this series about wanting to live up to Faker's legacy and like really honor Faker and by showing up as a Korean team in knockout stage, and so that would have been really cool. So hopefully next year they can have these players show up
Hopefully
and really
next
deliver
year,
that.
international travel is less complicated.
Yeah, hopefully.
Just my 2 cents. Let's just hope.
Yeah. So that would have been really cool.
So yeah, that's kind of my lasting thought is I'll be ready for next year. I'll be ready for next year. So I think it'll be better. And I think they'll try harder for it to be its own unique thing now that nobody gives a crap about the 11th year of a thing. Like, we did 10, we've done the 10 things. Okay, now just go do your own thing. It'll be way cooler.
Yeah, I did like the takeover theme a lot, and the X and like all that. I think they should have saved True Damage for the 10-year, but it is what it is.
Hindsight.
Yeah. Hindsight is 2020. Rip.
Yep. Hindsight is 2020. Oh, I want to die. I should not have made that joke. That's awful.
That's the next band. The new band that Akali's going to collab with is Hindsight.
All right. So
next band's going to be an Evelyn collab. It's not going to be a Akali collab.
Good.
Just going to call it right now.
Oh yeah, put it. It's going to be time stamped.
Yeah.
With that said, we now close the book on the 2020 Professional League of Legends season and immediately begin to look forward at 2021. Obviously, just today in the client, we had the big drop of the item rework system, which is going to shape what the game itself looks like next year in a very significant way. We're at the point where no one knows what they're doing yet, and it's fine and it's fun, but teams are gonna. I'm sure analysts right now are already on the point of let's figure out what works, let's figure out what doesn't work, what is new and good, what is old and still good. And also, you have to figure out the roster side of things and the organization side of things. So what we will start with, and all the things that we have to talk about in this section, I think almost nothing is confirmed by Riot or by teams yet. So this is all speculation as far as what we know, but it's from the most part, it's reporting that is trusted generally in the industry. So it's stuff we assume is probably going to come to pass until further notice. So the first element of this is the revamp of the format of the LCS for 2021. Travis Gafford reported on his YouTube channel and on stream that the LCS is looking at redoing their format for next season into removing spring playoffs and the spring championship. Possibly, I go watch his video. This is it as a podcast hoster. I hate not having written content for this because I can't just reference what the actual ideas were. But it's a
it's a single split. So instead of there being or single season, it'd almost be better to say
one
for LCS.
Big season.
Yeah. So instead of there being like two splits and then the winner of spring split getting these points towards or like seeding into summer playoffs, they've instead just made it one season. And so the only standings that really matter are your standings at the end of the whole season as far as playoff seeding and world's chances go. Now they are putting a break in the middle of the season where a 16 playoff can happen to get a spot for MSI, because obviously we'd have to send a competitor to MSI somehow. And they do want to have some competition for that rather than it just being a de facto whoever's in first regular season at that point in time. It does mean there's going to be more games. So that means that it's expected that there would be games Friday through Monday, I think, like all the time, as opposed to just 2 nights of games. And And so like that would be another thing that would happen with this is like more nights of games and then more games on those side nights, because they've had Friday Night League last year, but it felt underutilized. It was always like the second team of casters, it really felt like, and wasn't given the same resources that Saturday or Sunday was. And so then like it looks like they're going to be really investing in fleshing it out, and hopefully that really transitions.
Yeah. Can we sideline on the Friday night, Monday night league, like allocation of resources, just like as a plea, because it felt like LOL Esports, the brand, went the opposite direction that they should have, where Friday night and Monday night are going to be the try-hard League of Legends watchers, and they used it as like a try to like trick mainstream people into watching it by doing like I felt like younger targeted like stuff. I've actually just I don't know. It felt bad, and it felt like the dialogue and the segments and stuff were aimed at not the try hard. Like I watch all of the LOL LCS, and I really care about stats and data and stuff. And they're like, we're gonna have fun, and we're gonna do this different
You're talking
stuff.
about the Sushi Dragon after party, right? That's really your big
not
thing.
necessarily, because like I actually
Okay.
found a new appreciation for Sushi Dragon. Like after my initial like heaving, but it felt like what they were doing with Tigress and all of that and Mark Z. Like I initially had chalked it up to like just it's like the team that the staff that they're trying to train up and give more time to and give them. But like the segments they gave them and stuff like that was a little like less serious, and I don't know if it's how they chose to present it or how they were instructed to present it, because it just had a more casual feel to it, and it just was a huge turnoff as to the people that they should be trying to attract, which is like the people that are going to watch Monday through Friday. That's just a sideline that I just wanted to put that out there for the world to tear me a new one.
I want to see Riot's official announcement about this, because I want to see how they justify their changes in strategy, because I think that's going to be as notable as the change in strategy itself. Particularly because, Eric, correct me if I'm wrong, it's more games, but it remains best of one.
Yep.
Correct? Which that I think is something that could be put up for criticism based on, I mean, who knows how much we've put up, and they've talked before about how there's viewer fatigue involved with best of threes, and there's all these reasons not to do it, but it's on another time where, as a competitive region, NA inarguably failed. That, okay, what are we doing here, and what's the justification for it? Because if it is just the fan experience, that's fine. But I imagine from the team perspective, the teams are still going to want what can best prepare them to actually succeed at Worlds. And maybe that's entirely things outside of the format of LCS, but I think there's still a conversation to be had there. So I want to see what the official words on this are, because I think that's going to be very telling as to what the LCS's goals are. If maybe not the teams, then the LCS as a body.
The other words that like people were talking about as far as the early split goes is that there was a massive amount of with the LCS of dissatisfaction with the spring split, where teams and players didn't feel it meant anything, and then they actually, the players organization voted to not have the spring split this year. When coronavirus happened, they didn't want to even play remote. They just didn't want to have it, just complete cancel. And no other league in the world voted that way. And a lot of that's tied to the fact that it didn't feel like to the players or to necessarily the orgs that those games mattered at all. And if you think about it as like you win this whole split to get a maybe a playoff bye or like some playoff seeding, like it's pretty much irrelevant, especially when they let 8 teams into the playoffs from the second split. So like I personally definitely thought they had to do something with the spring split to increase its value. And I think getting rid of it is one of those options where it's just make it so all the games matter towards your end of the year seeding. What'll be interesting to see play out is from the more cultural perspective. If it's one season, when do teams pivot rosters or try out academy players? Because like what we saw with this past split is that LCS teams didn't try out academy players, except if they were like in the Immortals case where the whole thing completely bombed, and like teams like stuck with their main rosters way too long because they felt like all we have to do is get into 8th place to make playoffs and theoretically make worlds, even if it's like a long shot. And it definitely felt like that with some of the roster decisions these teams were making that were very aggressive, aggressive in the sense of like win now rather than win later, and going into playoffs. And so
more games in a longer season, in theory, should benefit the ability to adjust on the fly and to try different configurations of a roster. I do think that's going to be a huge plus to this.
Yeah, and if I can jump in, I think like when they'll change around is hopefully around meta shifts where you have players that are better in certain metas, and I think with item like the benefit of the, or I guess just the nature of what the item changes provide is that like you can change that and you're going to nerf a whole class of, so like let's say the blinking 80 carry item gets like gutted, like that will change how you handle 4 or 5 champions instead of just like the 1 or 2 that they usually balance an item around. So like there's going to be opportunity to see like they're going to change the meta around, and like different classes or styles of champions or play styles are going to come up, and that's when you're like, hey, you're our assassin player, you're up, let's go, or you're our whoever, or tank top lane, tank jungler, you get in there. And that's what I've always wanted to see, just like as a personal player, that like I'm really good in tank metas, other metas I suck, and I can only assume that like professional players have preferred play styles, and when the meta favors them and they want to be in that position, or they just like think of like Fnatic when Blippo was playing bot lane, like that kind of stuff. That's what I hope to see with like an extended split, and the items working out the way they are.
Eric, you look like you want to say words. Say words.
Well, on the flip side of that, there's also the fact that the keystone item champion combos can be so powerful, it looks like on this patch so far, that one tricks could also see a massive increase in value. Where if Viper's Riven continues to be Viper's Riven, all of a sudden I could see him absolutely stomping some people and getting banned out every game. And he already was getting banned out, because some of these like combos can be very breaking. And especially with the nature of NA solo queue versus like Chinese solo queue, as far as like exposure to like aggressive combative matchups, I have a feeling that one tricks will be very potent to have on your roster going into this season.
Yeah, but the problem with one tricks, as it always has been, is to be a one trick to function really in competitive, you kind of got to be a 4 trick. Right. Because you need to be able to survive getting banned out. And that was Viper's problem, is if teams let the Riven through, FlyQuest just won games off of that, and Dignitas just won games off of that. So teams didn't let it through, and then he was too big of a detractor to the rest of the roster when he wasn't on this one-trick pick to actually let them win games. And that's when, okay, the bans are working as intended. So one trick, that's fine, but if it's a one trick that you are actively too bad to be able to participate in the roster still when you're one champion that everyone with any kind of scouting knows exists gets banned out, that doesn't work in competitive. That will never work in competitive. Period.
So yes, but I expect these one tricks at this level to be good enough to play meta too. And so Viper did look bad on some of these meta picks, but on Dignitas at least, him being on the meta picks wasn't what was losing them games. It was the rest of the map. And so it was more the fact that if they didn't have him hard carrying on this champion, that they had a problem. And it's like my other example of this is actually Licorice. Like Licorice every season has a couple of champions that he can solo carry games on, but he can still play weak side or play these other like aggressive combative matchups just fine. So like I expect these players to have like some pick that's really good.
Or
that
like
lets them
Huni.
move off.
Huni's another great example.
Huni's another great example.
Just
Rumble.
win you the game or not.
Yeah. And so like I expect those players to have good value if you can get them to show up. Because like especially with this longer season, the more chances you have to get those picks through pick ban because either teams don't think about it or because they feel that the meta OPs are more relevant than banning out Rumble from EG or wherever Huni ends up. Like that'll be a very big factor in how these
like,
games can
And
progress.
it's still best of ones.
Yeah.
Steven brought up the like off meta constructions. I imagine we're going to see some of that come up just because this is such a seismic shift in what's going on. And the question then is going to be who's going to be the new Hjarnan. Because we think back about Hjarnan on G2 in 2018, how that the Heimerdinger pick melted pick bans every single time you had to play against G2 because teams couldn't figure out how to play against. And you gotta think there's gonna end up being something weird like that somebody's gonna figure out and have in the back pocket.
I'm hoping there's a lot of that because then you're talking about like Sonateric and Lux. Lux, was it Lux Sona? I can't remember who's the Lux buddy. Yeah,
it was Luxona and Luxteric have both been things. So like so as far as the Hjarnan thing goes, just to call this out, like it can feel like that's a adaptive thing inside of a meta, but these are actually like one tricks that teams know how to play around. Because like Hjarnan in EU Masters this year, like got his team to like semis or into the finals by playing Heimerdinger bot lane. He still does this. And it works, and your team just has to know how to play with this at a high level and function. Like off meta stuff can work and function if you know what you're doing, which sounds
or it can go terribly wrong. Source double lift Sona,
but best of ones. You take them for the first 3 games. You give them a temporary golden glue contract, and you win some.
But this goes to like a traditional sports perspective. The NFL plays a 16-game regular season, so every single game matters a whole lot. If you lose your first 4 games of the season, you're pretty much screwed. You don't make the playoffs. That's how it works. On the flip side, to take the American sports example, you have baseball. Baseball plays 162 games in their regular season. So individual games, you lose some. Every team loses at least 50 every year. It's part of how it works. Now, the LCS isn't going to play 162 games in their regular season. That's not going to happen. It's going to look a lot more like probably a soccer schedule where it's between 30 and 40. And that's like...
That feels good.
We can get away with losing 4 or 5 games in a chunk of the season and still be able to rebound and be able to try stuff, be able to experiment, whether it's picks or roster or any of it. It opens the door to being more able to get creative and to take a shot. And if it doesn't work, it doesn't work.
One of the things that I've heard called out with that does make this interesting, though, is player mentality going into this. Because, previously, these players have been conditioned to have a reset halfway through the year where, doesn't matter if you messed up split 1, you can come into split 2 and just show up and play the game and then still make worlds or still have a good playoff run. And whereas now there is no reset really. And so like finding a way to like recover from slumps will be incredibly important for some of these players to see if they can pull it off, as well as like how do they reset, and then also how do they deal with it if their team has a disastrous season. So like one of the things like David mentioned with the baseball season, right, is teams have like 50 losses. They're accustomed to losing even for prolonged stretches and then turning it around. Rather than soccer, I was thinking hockey. and with the Blues NHL Stanley Cup run just recently, where they were like dead last in the league for like the substantial beginning of the season, turned it around, and then ended up winning the cup. Like, obviously they had a coaching shift, and the players came online suddenly, like halfway through the year. But like the point remains that there's like these massive like momentum shifts that you see in these leagues, that are used to or accustomed to having just more games, and then like more bandwidth essentially when you are doing poorly. And so like how will the players like adapt to this sudden shift into this more game schedule, as well as the coaching staff for them? Surprisingly enough, I think this is one of the best metas to have a really strong sports psychologist. Like, so, Weldon, who just got let go from CLG, might have actually been much more useful for a team's roster this year than he was last year, because suddenly we're looking at how do you keep players at the top of their game for a longer window of time.
But why would you make your sports psychologist your strategic head coach?
Oh, I disagree with that completely.
You idiots.
Yeah.
Do you have some pent up feelings on that?
And they're
I don't
PR
care
mode this year,
anymore.
right? That's anyway. But
I'm offset narcotic. I don't care anymore.
So that's the interesting stuff.
So
yeah, it's. I want to see the official announcement, and I want to see how it plays, because it's gonna turn it feel much more like a traditional North American European style sport, as opposed to what the thing that the system has always most closely represented structurally is Central and South American soccer leagues are the only professional sports leagues I know of in the world that have two different splits as a part of their season. It's called the Apertura and the Clausura. That's in the, I think most of the leagues that's how it's set up. And it's never been something I've been able to wrap my head around as a North American sports fan. So having one single season that's longer and more spread out and has more opportunity for growth and development, I think is going to be easier to understand and better coming from an outside perspective. Eric's point about how it impacts the people inside the scene who have been used to this setup for the LCS was formally organized in 2013 in season 3. So it's been 8 years of about the same way things are for all these teams and the way it works. I'm interested to see if LCS making this change and setting this up is a bellwether for other leagues moving in the same direction, particularly if it does work better competitively for them. It would not surprise me if LAC did the same thing if they see this work.
So something that might be a good indicator of this is working, are there more opportunities for revenue generation for the individual teams? I would assume with more game time, there's more ad revenue that maybe Riot can trickle down to these teams that are franchised. Maybe it changes how sponsorship works, where they can get more sponsorships for the individual teams, because I mean that's like this. It has to start making money for success. I think it's been mentioned that these top tier teams can cut checks.
How do you keep the interest level up during the doldrum seasons? Which is a question that every single sport has to answer. How much do you care about a single baseball game in August in any given year? There's an interest trough that'll happen in the middle of the season. If this is how they're going to do it, it'll be around or right after MSI, and having the MSI break in there to kind of have a functional restart. That's how, based on how it works, it's going to work, kind of. But like halfway, 2/3 of the way through the season, where the games don't matter that much, is the interest still going to be there? Are people still going to have eyes on games? Are people still going to be involved in whatever kind of interaction they have?
Well, I think that's where drops and rewards in game, there's a unique opportunity that only League of Legends / esports can apply. Is you can incentivize players very heavily to
there were a few
watch.
Things I saw people more upset about than the drops associated with the world streaming this year.
Yeah, because they're
and how
bad.
they were implemented and the awards that were given, because that was done really poorly across the board the entire time.
Yeah, like a playlist. Like, come on, like that's on the marketing team and the human eye check. And like, if you're gonna cut a sponsor deal with like who they're cutting sponsors deals, like you've gotta like if you're cutting a deal with Spotify, that drop needs to be like, hey, you get like a month free or something like that. Like that's more than doable for Spotify, and LOL Esports could have negotiated a contract like that. So I think like if you make the drops worth it, it's a tool. But if you're just gonna half it, like come on, no, it's not. It's not worth it. But the opportunity is still there. Like it's infinitely harder to do that with baseball. Like you can't be like, hey, you're gonna get assigned baseball when your son goes plays. The next time they go up to t-ball, it's like no, like the next time you log in, you're gonna get like something, I don't know, another icon that we paid an artist $300 to make. Like it's there, the opportunity is there.
Yep, it just needs to be executed better than it was.
Yeah.
All right, I'm about out of thoughts on this topic. Eric, you good?
Yeah.
Okay, cool. We're going to touch on a couple of roster-related topics before we are done for the night. Again, teams cannot officially sign players in free agency until Monday, November 16th at, I think it's 7 o'clock Pacific time, so 9 o'clock at night in Central Time, where we all are, over early in the morning in Europe, about mid-afternoon in Korea and China, if I remember right, or early afternoon. That's when the shoe drops. And we've already started to see some rumors and some things come through. The most interesting one, obviously, is the TSM mid laner role. So we haven't talked since it was announced that Bjergsen has retired from competitive play and will shift to coaching as in TSM's open coaching role. And it was reported today that Power of Evil is going to leave FlyQuest and sign for TSM to fill their mid lane role as soon as free agency opens on Monday. So, Eric, you are a historically tortured TSM fan in your original form as a fan of North American League of Legends esports. What is your thought on Power of Evil replacing Bjergsen in the mid lane and Bjergsen's move to coach?
Well, a couple of things. First, I think that in some ways, PoE is the perfect pick for them in this scenario. I'm always nervous saying things like that because whenever I like these roster moves, it's a sign that we're missing something. But the big reason why I think that PoE is a great option is PoE is the most powerful mid laner in LCS that I believe will actually accept feedback and coaching from Bjergsen in how to play the game. Whereas if they had picked up Jensen or some more powerhouse mid laner than PoE, it would be more of a head-to-head kind of relationship or competitive between the two, rather than having a head coach mentor retired like GOAT from NALCS, and then having some younger player in the mid lane. And you don't want to go too much younger, even though you ideally do want to give Bjergsen a young roster to work with, because you still want to have a good enough roster to win, because they did just win the regular season. Well, not the regular season, but they did win LCS last split in playoffs in good form. So you want to be able to still have a winning roster going into this as TSM. You never want to drop or have a real rebuild year as that org. I also like PoE because PoE is a mid lane focused mid laner. And that is also historically true of TSM, even back into the Reggie days. Like, you don't pick Niski up as TSM, even though Niski is a good player, because Niski's job is to snowball the other lanes. And this is team solo mid. You stick your mid laner there, and then you gank for them. Now, we'll have to see how the rest of the roster plays around PoE, but like that to me makes the most sense for what the org's identity is, and as well as like giving Bjergsen somebody he can work with that still has the chops to really win against a lot of the lower tier teams.
It's interesting to me in that it, as it stands, locks TSM in with import slots, because assuming they keep Broken Blade, which is not a guaranteed thing by any stretch. It's your 2 solo laners are your 2 import slots, and that's where you're at. And then you wonder, are they going to look to upgrade bot lane? Has been the question we've had about TSM. Are Double and Biofrost going to be able to stick for another year? The thing that I mooted for TSM was to go and import a bot lane, and that obviously is not going to happen now. So I'm very interested.
They do have lost. They do have lost an academy. So like that's the other big thing that's come up is just bring Lost up, and so then it's really just support that's the super big question that's outstanding. Because like even if they change up their top laner spot from Broken Blade to somebody else, like it's to me that like that's really hard for them to lose as far as what they can do with top lane. Whereas like what's going to happen with support, and then like is Double still going to keep stay on the main roster, or are they going to have Lost show up? Like whatever they're doing there, like that makes a bigger difference in like how well this team really shapes up to me.
The theoretical construction for them is if they let Broken Blade go and buy out Licorice, which I think is a very realistic thing that could happen. It's one of the other rumors that's been around is how high Licorice's buyout is, and that no NA orgs outside of TSM and TL will buy it. With I think Golden Guardians and FlyQuest both being rumored to have sniffed around it but not been willing to meet the valuation that it was at. I think them going for Licorice could be a very reasonable scenario to get them an import slot, at which point then you can get more creative, or you can just bring up your entire Academy bot lane, which I've advocated for in bringing up Lost and Treats.
Yep.
With
that's
Treats
what I would
being
do.
an EU import that was necessary, which I think would make a ton of sense if that's the direction they want to go. Now, I don't think Broken Blade was necessarily a problem. I think Licorice would be an upgrade on him in both being a native NA player, and I think he's better. So I think that's a very realistic scenario that could happen for TSM. We'll see, but that would solve a lot of their problems if that's what they chose to do.
I think if you're giving Bjergsen the best like entry to coaching, you keep him with as much as the team that you can that's going to listen to him. I know from listening, the opinion that I've drawn is that he wants to be in a position where he is sculpting minds and that he is like overviewing the game. He's talked about like not being able to trust people, not being able to do the calls that he wants to do in interviews from what I've seen. And so if Broken Blade and PoE and Lost in Treats are who you set up to listen to Bjergsen, I think that's the right call, and I think they would listen to him, and I think they would take his coaching very well, because it's the same thing as being shot called by it. And I think that's a good lineup for success without breaking bank either, so they could do a high buy maybe halfway through the split if they have an opportunity, or even next year when they have another good showing.
All right, let's talk about the really spicy rumor that is still very much just a rumor, which is the possibility of Perks moving from G2 to C9. It is a rumor. It's been reported on. It does not sound like I mentioned Licorice's buyout being a problem for NA organizations. Perks' buyout from G2 is going to be a problem for anybody. I think it's been reported that it's a $5 million buyout, and that's just not
feasible.
Not money we have seen move around in esports really at this point.
At least 2.5.
Popped a little bit. What?
At least 2.5.
And yeah. They will probably ask for more. And that's like, I think that's more than Jensen's contract renewal, which was one of the ones that had popped some eyes. And you can see how it makes sense for C9. It would be reuniting Perks with Sven, they played together and were very successful on G2 in the past. Would be a bummer for Niski, but you could probably get somebody to pay a pretty decent penny for Niski. But I think for C9, the problem is they can't do this move unless they know for sure they're getting paid for Licorice and for Niski.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
And I could see like Cloud9 cutting a good deal to like someone like FlyQuest for Niski in that reality. Like I think they would say we've groomed. I don't like the word groomed. We've brought up Niski. He's a good player. He's a good contract. we can let him go and get a good amount of money, but not like really have to get a large sum, and get a good amount of money for Licorice, because we're gonna get a big purchase here that we're gonna franchise around. So I see that happening, and I think that's an awesome opportunity if one of the mid-tier teams, like Golden Guardians or EG, could pick up a Niski contract. That'd be really cool to see.
ED doesn't have an import slot.
I mean, unless they drop them.
Well, sorry, you just mentioned EG not having an import slot. This is Huni's year, right?
Is it?
Ooh, no, I think it's this year.
It's this year. Like, that was why they picked him up, is because he was gonna shift. Oh no, but they're still playing. They're gonna play Bang and Jizuke. That's the plan.
Yeah, there's like so. Yeah. But if it's a mid laner, then yeah, it's Niski for Jizuke. So you'd be still at 2. But I wouldn't do that.
No, but we'll see. Like, Niski is really good though. Like, as far as like spots where I'd like to see him, here Eric goes again. But like, I'd like to see him on 100 Thieves, because what do you need for 100 Thieves? You need a lane dominant mid laner who can gank for someday. Surprise! And they've tried that before and had failed because of like weird coaching staff issues and other nonsense. But like, I really think
not being good enough to do that in this league, which is a problem.
Yeah, but like Niski, I think would be like great pickup for 100 Thieves, as far as like how they want to approach the game, and then building advantages where they want their points of focus to be on the map, especially with Contracts, who is another former Cloud9 player. Like, it makes a ton of sense to me.
I know there's some kind of like clause or something like for non-performing franchise teams. Is CLG at risk of that going into
CLG
effect?
is very at risk going into this year.
It's at the end of this year.
So does that mean they're gonna cut some fat daddy stacks to like get some good people to get them out of that buffer zone and get them into safety? Like, I don't know what the monetary risk is.
They've done some stuff. They look better than what I've seen from Immortals this offseason, but that doesn't necessarily mean much. So like, we'll really see. Also, like, if they do change it up to a single year or a single season instead of splits, like, how does that change the negative performance clause in the franchise contract? Because previously it would have needed to be they'd have to mess up both splits this year, but now there's just a season. So like, how does that factor in? Does that mean it's 2 years instead of 1? Or like, do they essentially get a year of extra time to like fail, or does that just mean that at the end of this year they've had the one shot?
They have to be above 9th.
They need to get into at least 8th.
Yeah.
I think, and that'll be like,
I'd be sweating.
I don't know. So the way that the way that the offseason always works in NA is kind of dominoes, right? Where you really need to see like where the big name players go from who are nationalized players, right? So where's Licorice going? Where's Licorice going? I don't know. Where did Jensen go? That was like one of the big ones. He got re-signed immediately.
He got re-signed to TL for a long
and then
money.
And now we're gonna have to see where do these other top players go, who then also are following them or moving around. So like PoE and Santorin are like a couple of those players. Like, where are they gonna end up? And then and it looks like FlyQuest is gonna have to really do a lot of work on their roster this year, from what I've heard so far. So it's like, where are these other players who either made it to Worlds, who had breakout years, where do they get picked up? And then then after like the top teams have mostly solidified their rosters, you see like these other teams try and pick up scraps or figure it out, is like where a lot of it's going to be. Because, teams want to play on the teams that win, or players want to play on the teams that win. So like, you'll see players going for Cloud9, Team Liquid, and TSM, and that's about it for like the real big names. And then after that, it's really just picking up the scraps at this point. is what it'll feel like. And like while I'm saying scraps here, that doesn't mean that it's not going to be good players. It just means that it's like they're not going to have like Perks is not going to go, if he does come to NA at all, he's not going to go to a team below top 2. That's just not going to be a thing. And so you have to figure out like.
I disagree because Cloud9 did not finish top 2 this split.
All right, fine. One of the top 3 overall teams in NA. You know, you gotta see where these players show up to. I had discounted TSM from top 2, but you know, I guess that.
They literally
that's not
won
true.
the split.
That
Sorry.
is not correct.
Yeah, the 06 run just like discounted everything from my mind for how well they did this.
Everybody else lost to them in playoffs. That's on them.
Yeah, but so that's kind of like what like we'll need to see happen.
Okay, yeah, you guys have provoked me. That we get to end on this. How would you fix CLG? Ready, go.
Oh, jeez. Wait, fix as in get 8th place, or fix as in make playoffs?
So,
I know what I would do.
Okay. Well, I always start with the coaching staff, where it's like you need to have a good coaching staff. I don't know where Reaper's going, and like has he announced what he's doing now that he's not on C9 anymore? Because I would pick up Reaper and then I'd have him build a roster. That is how I would start immediately.
Can they afford the top OPL team and just play that?
Pick up Legacy?
Yeah, just pick up Legacy. Just buy it.
Wow. Oof. Wow, and that puts us in the weird spot of like where do we think of Legacy as they stood this year?
But here's the thing. Number one, even if you were to do that, you're buying Legacy 4 out of 5 players from Legacy because Legacy would be upgraded by Pobelter.
Yeah.
Who is like the one player that's under contract for CLG that they need to keep.
Yeah. So
and Legacy's weakest spot was mid lane. So like even if you're doing that meme or not, that's what you do. Is you buy 4
I would
out of
think
5,
so.
and
like
you keep those in the mid lane.
It'd be interesting.
It holds water.
So like I would go for Reaper, or I'd go for West Rice, or I'd go for like Kelsey or one of these other successful Academy League coaches who have been picked up. Like grab one of them, have them build a roster, and then have them, and then somehow build up infrastructure because like their Academy teams also have been like just really struggling, and you can't have no success. Like that's pretty inexcusable. Like. You know, Dignitas, even though they were really struggling in LCS, like the previous year had the most powerful academy roster that like they had players who went from their academy org to start on some of these like starting rosters and then everything fell apart for them too. Like there are a number of teams that are in real trouble and that are going to have to figure out some way to make longevity work. Like FlyQuest was the team that had really somehow managed to grow beyond their like their lower financial limitations than some of these other rosters, and so we're going to see these other teams figure out some way to make it work.
I do have a small theory on how FlyQuest pulled that off, by the way. A lot of these charity things, I'm assuming, are for grants and tax write-offs, and so that will make your finances go a little further.
Well, I mean, I would really just I would give a lot more of the credit to the ownership, where the ownership supplied it's Megumi who's like the CEO, right? And then they did, in addition to like the eco-friendly branding, they also like just seem to actually have a much better business atmosphere than these other organizations, where a lot of these other orgs were supplying a ton of pressure on their rosters, either for cost or for results or for whatever else, and then just weren't actually doing a good job at things. And so it seems like the ownership here, which is new ownership, by the way, like this is not the original ownership group that got the FlyQuest banner. This was a new wave of people who came in after the fact who really rejuvenated it.
Yeah, wasn't it a sports ball team that owned them originally?
Well, they're still owned. The overall owner is still the Milwaukee Bucks, right, or whoever but they had a transition for like the LCS rep, right? So like I forget who their original person was who represented the Bucks and the owner family into getting the slot and to setting it up, and like that GM layer did a terrible job in their like first split or so, besides just having Turtle run branding. And Turtle's great at running branding, so I don't like complain, but it's like, but then they transitioned into this new owner group, and they've done a fantastic job. So I really think that they made a good decision there in like giving it to someone who has brought flair to the game, and then also is like hasn't been putting the same pressure, it feels, on the players. Like, I'm really worried about Nadeshot and some of these other young owners just putting way too much pressure on the players and coaching staffs to deliver, and that's not going to be healthy if that's like your only way to really generate revenue or hype.
Which blows my mind.
My CLG question into a FlyQuest answer, by the way. Good job.
We try to well, it's a branding thing. So like CLG could, like, you're talking about redoing staffing and stuff. Like they need to reevaluate what their brand is and how they can engage their audience, and like player performance. Like it's a mental game too. So like when you have people cheering you on and you're proud of the team you're on and like you feel good going to work, like you might do better. And
So the difference between CLG and FlyQuest in this whole thing, though, is that Hotshot and his ownership tier still exist and have existed even before they got the money. That's like the key difference. Is like, you know, FlyQuest is newer and followed the money in a lot of ways.
Mm-hmm.
And so I think it would be a lot harder for CLG to pull off any kind of like higher level culture or leadership transition than it was for like FlyQuest.
But I think getting someone like Reaper would go a long ways towards establishing a different culture shift on the sporting level. Step 2, after you get Reapered, by the way, is to buy Viper and Lehens. Those are your imports.
Yeah,
they're in a terrible team in the LCK. They're losing. They're unhappy, but you know how good they can be. Lehens would immediately be a top 3 support in the league. Viper would immediately be a top 3 AD in the league. So you have a mid laner who's not an import who speaks Korean. You have a Korean coach. Get the best free agent Korean bot lane, bring him over, and wreck face with it.
I totally agree for Viper and Lehens. The awkward thing that I've been hearing a lot this year is that we might be back into a very heavy China is the preferred region for people to transition to year from LCK. And because like I think Tarzan is already rumored to go to one of the LPL teams. And so I would not be surprised if some of the Griffin players who are very unhappy after that split up are going to LPL and like, or looking primarily at LPL over.
Viper and Lehens were on HLE last split, but that's fair.
Yeah. Yeah, and HLE sucked. So like that's that's what I meant, is like these players who got stuck on these bad LCK teams, I expect them to go to LPL. Like that's where I would expect.
The bigger one that wasn't on a team that sucked is Chovy. That has been. There have been
you could also argue that DRX sucked, but they had Chovy. So like, it's. I would not be surprised if Chovy goes to LPL too, or to just a different LCK team. Like, there's a lot of potential movement in LCK this offseason too. It's just harder for us to get rumors from that because like Jacob Wolf doesn't exist for LCK.
Yeah, like
he doesn't exist for ESPN either.
The CLG point is get a Korean coach, sign Viper and Lehens, and then find good enough jungle and top in NA.
What did CLG already have for Korean support is like one of my big questions, because they've already had Ruin for ages, right?
Yep.
It's like, have they not invested in it? Because that was the other thing that came out of like, that's the other thing that came out of like talking with Jack about how did C9 make this work, and talking with Steve about how did TL make this work. And the answer is that they've had like cultural advisors as well as linguistics like lessons offered to everyone on the team, as well as a translator, as well as the coaching staff, like from the get-go. Like, and they took time to build this up.
One of C9's best acquisitions that they ever made was splashing the cash to get Robin, the translator from LCK, to come live in their complex and be their main Korean guy.
Yeah. And then like also like Rebirth and Rapid Star and Reignover, and it's like they had like this huge investment in making that happen, and like I haven't seen that from CLG, and that's like the thing is like if they haven't already built that infrastructure out, it might be too late.
Man, there are a lot of former Korean players that could give you a nice helping start out there. Like,
Yeah.
for example, I saw Gen.G released 2 of the 3 members of their coaching staff. And, like, I don't know how good the English is, but sign Trace. Why not?
Or, like, find other people who are in scene who can make it work, even if, like, you don't have them in a public role. Because there are other, like... All right, so I'm thinking Loco Doco, right? So Loco's still been in LA. He hasn't left. And, like, after he got booted from his coaching role because he said something stupid on Twitter, like... he's still there, and like so there are plenty of people who are already over here who like maybe you don't want to put into a public face of your brand, but you could still have help for some of this stuff and get some really good value out of having these experts who have been in the scene for ages.
Yep. All right, well, I think we've speculated plenty. We've been on for 90 minutes, so I think that's good for now. We didn't talk at all about EU, and that's fine. I know we've had a couple of moves get reported there, and I think there's plenty to talk about there, particularly if Perks does move, because I have no idea who G2 should and will sign for their AD carry spot.
Upset's the big thought.
Upset would be the one that would make the most sense. That's the easy one, but we'll see if it happens. But we will know a lot more, I would anticipate, by the time we record next Wednesday, because we'll be 2 days into everything. And from what all of the talking heads have been hinting at on Twitter, it's going to move pretty thick and fast once the window opens. I know Fionn, Tyler Ertzberger, formerly of ESPN, now a free agent, has been hinting that it's going to be bonkers and it's going to move fast, particularly in NA.
That's
so
fun.
We're like, next week, we get to talk a lot about more about what actually is, because I think that's going to be as interesting as anything is. We can speculate, we can guess about who's going where and what we don't actually know about the Korean scene. But once there's pens to paper, we're going to be able to talk a lot more about what we see. So with that said, Steven, promo, go.
Go to FNKYgames.com. There's a link tree now that goes to everything. We got good merch, more coming in the next couple weeks, just in time to get Christmas gifts for people, because you want to help out your boys, and everybody needs to look good. Follow us on social media. It's all the same at FNKYgames: Twitter, Instagram, Facebook. It's a good time. You should be there.
Steven, I need to know.
Mm-hmm.
Does FNKYgames sell onesies and baby apparel?
I've been looking into it. They're, man, gamer dad stuff. It's coming. I'll commit to that. Gamer dad stuff. It's coming.
Because it's soon. Eric will be the only not dad on this podcast.
We'll have to do our
Cat
own dad. Yeah, cat dad.
Yeah, Eric will be the cat dad, and Steven and I will be the human dads.
Yes. Then we can have an official dad cast.
So yeah, because I'm gonna need the hookups.
Hell
if
yeah.
You got some stuff.
Well, let's do it.
So that I can raise my child properly to be a true nerd.
Yes.
And we end after the promo with the question we've long been asking: what you playing in solo queue today, since the entire game changed today? Steven, have you played a game since the patch dropped?
No.
What do you want to play?
Ooh.
What do you?
I want to play Shaco. I want to play
Read the
Shaco.
changes?
I miss Shaco. I want to be a clown. Clown IRL. Clown in game.
Well, and I've heard the AD assassin changes are the hotness right now. So some AD Shaco might be the place to start. Eric, I think I know your answer already, but what's your favorite thing about the new patch?
So the main thing I've done so far is play Cho'Gath with the Frozen Fist mythic item, where you get bigger for every item you complete. So then I just got to like 10 stacks and like an extra 25% size from items, and it was an absolute delight to be bigger than towers at 30 minutes.
I've played one game on the new thing. I played Fiora. She feels about the same, but I am confused by her build order. Um, we were talking about that off air before this because I can't process in my head how it's supposed to work right now.
You gotta get some
And it
extra
makes me
wrinkles in
upset.
your brain.
But I like I'm interested to play ADC a little bit, but I also my last my last game of the olden times before the item rework, I got to lane against the Diamond 3 ADC, and that went about as poorly for me as you can imagine.
I played mid Nocturne and was like 18-5 in that game, and we didn't win, and it made me sad.
Because the Ashe was Diamond 3
The Ashe was Diamond 3
and was really good.
Yeah.
She shot you in the knee.
She shot all of us in the knee.
Yep, it was bad. So with that said, go play games this week as you do. Figure out what's good. Tell us what's OP, so that I can definitely not actually ever play solo queue because I'm not going to do that to myself. And we'll be back next week talking all about free agency and who's gone where and what's going on, and all of that next week. So feel free to check that out. Follow the socials. They'll be linked. You know where to find them. I don't want to read them out. I'm lazy. And yeah, subscribe, follow, like all the social media. We got that audio content. We got that video content. We got all the hotness going on. So yeah, that's all we got for this week. Steven, Eric, I'm David. This has been Reaction Time. We'll see you next week.